Every now and then, I come across a video game that is not just a piece of interactive entertainment, it's an experience. A beautiful, haunting journey through long abandoned hallways of a cold, isolated, uncaring research facility, where vicious foes hunt you with mindless fervor, with only one goal in mind: to see you silenced. It's a story of deep philosophical ponderings, tackling themes of self-identity and transhumanism with unmatched bluntness. What does it mean to be alive? And how far would you go to preserve your fleeting existence in the universe? This science fiction masterpiece is called Soma. But yeah, Metroid Dread is pretty cool too. There's no way I'll be able to talk about this game without full spoilers, and I don't really see any value in that anyway, so I'm not gonna even try. This'll be my only warning. If you haven't played Dread yet, and are planning to do so, and would rather go in blind, then this is the point where I bid you farewell. As for the rest of us, let's get to it. The newest Metroid has quickly become one of those video games. You know, the type that gets universally praised by everyone who gets their Metroidvania craving mitts on it. Praise that stems purely from the fact that it's a fun and rewarding game to play. A good old gamer's game experience, where the only dissenting voices are the types of folks who do not in fact even enjoy playing their video games, but would rather watch an interactive movie and then write a puff piece about how progressive/unprogressive it is. That type of game. So what exactly is so amazing about Metroid Dread? What warrants all that praise? What makes it special amongst its contemporaries, both in terms of Metroidvanias and video games as a whole? Well, honestly, it's really not all that special. The game's DNA borrows heavily from the conventions of its own established franchise, as well as the extended genre it originally helped spawn. If you've ever played any Metroidvania, you largely know what to expect. An interconnected network of hallways and chambers, light exploration and puzzle solving, power-ups which slowly open the world bit by bit, simplistic combat mechanics, broken up by set-piece moment or boss fight here and there, that kind of stuff. It's iterative rather than innovative, but that's exactly the power of Dread. It's not concerned with subverting or reinventing the wheel, or adding unnecessary mechanics to a fine-as-it-is formula. Rather, the reason that makes Metroid Dread an excellent game at its core is its fantastic execution of simple gameplay fundamentals. Number 1. Control. Samus goes exactly where you command her. Movement is quick, slick and responsive. Samus speeds up from 0 to 100 and pivots back in an instant. That signature Metroid jump arc where Samus goes all whoosh whoosh feels as good as ever. There's this satisfying sense of weight to the character, yet floatiness to the leaping all at once. It's honestly hard to explain without just shoving the controller into your hand, but take my word for it. The simple addition of a slide maneuver makes the game a joy to blast through. The way it combos into the morph ball is such a simple, tiny, seemingly insignificant upgrade, but for me, it's the single best change movement-wise. Seriously, I would prefer if every previous Metroid got retrofitted with this. It makes everything so much smoother. Same can be said about the laser pointer free aim mode. I was actually one of the handful of people who didn't coom their collective loads all over Samus Returns on the 3DS. I thought it was a fine addition to the series, but nothing spectacular, with a myriad of smaller flaws that kept it from being all it could be. The free aim, however, was the best addition in that game, and in Dread it feels even better. Placing pinpoint shots has never been so good in 2D Metroid before this. Instead of the old 8-way locked aim, you can be sure that no matter where you stand on the battlefield, there's always a line that'll send the missile right at the enemy. The combat in general is best it's ever been. All the base options are simple: run, jump, slide, shoot, either run and gun or in free aim mode. There's also a simple yet effective risk versus reward counter move. Time it correctly and the enemy is just gone. Yet another maneuver that makes the game even faster and slicker to play once you get the hang of it. When dealing with the basic mooks, it's a simple case of obstacle removing, not much there. As for the bosses, that's where the combat truly shines. All the fundamentals of good boss design are here. They all got well telegraphed attack patterns and clearly painted fuck me points, with the minimal amount of gimmickiness. Once you get their patterns down, these fights become an awesome back and forth where you dash and dodge and weave past attacks, all the while unleashing a barrage of missiles every chance you get. I've already played the game a dozen times to completion, and these fights are the best part each time. It's satisfying to try and fail all the bosses more and more efficiently. If anything, the game could have used more dedicated combat sections. Oh, and a boss rush mode. The combat is that much fun. I also did a 0% run through the game, just to test out how far the game can be pushed. With low missile count and no health upgrades, it basically boils down to an ultra hard Samus must die mode, where every mistake is a one-hit kill. It's tough, but doable. A testament to just how good and fair the game's design is. I just love it when a game has tight controls. It's relaxing to play and satisfying to get better at the mechanics when I don't have to deal with any obnoxious jank. Every missed jump is on me, and every hit I receive is purely my fault. There's actually a nice balance between skill floor and skill ceiling. New players have all the tools in their disposal to succeed with minimal struggle, while experienced players can optimize their runs through the game into perfection. Exploring the world and blasting even simple enemies is so much more fun when the player character feels good to move around. You get that right, and you got yourself a decent game already. Number 2. Level design. Like I said before, Dread largely follows the basic motifs of Metroidvania. The entire world is an interconnected maze of corridors, most of them locked, opening in predetermined order via each new power-up the player collects. It's a time-tested formula, one that the series itself started long ago, and it's executed here as pristinely as ever. The shape and layout of obstacles in each room is nothing grand or mind-blowing, just a simple test of leaping ability, enemy disposal, or light puzzle solving. And when I say light, I mean floating into the stratosphere light. The most demanding it gets is finding a hidden breakable wall at a couple of points. Metroidvanias can be roughly categorized into two groups, those that are more linear and those that lean heavily on the sprawling exploration. Think Ori and the Blind Forest vs Hollow Knight. Dread is firmly in the former group. The path through the game is strictly set, even if the game never outright tells you where to go next. However, the game is quite good at funneling the player naturally around the map. You may go through a room via one path the first time, and come back another way once you receive your next upgrade. It's up to the player to notice the subtle nudging from the game and check the most obvious path forward every time they get a new toy. Or not. There's nothing stopping the player from meandering around, searching for extra item pickups, instead of rushing down the intended path. The player is given choice, and the player is trusted to be smart enough to find their way without excess hand-holding. For me, that's good Metroidvania design. Much of the charm with these games is about exploration, and if there are no branching paths, nothing to find, and no possibility to make the wrong turn, then it's not exploring, it's just walking down a path. That's the thing about exploration, it's at once a gift of freedom to the player and a subtle obstacle to overcome. Number 3. Pacing. If the player decides to heed the signposting, the game becomes a fast and tightly packed experience. There's minimal downtime between major events, there's always a new power-up, fresh scenery, or a boss fight around every most corner. Either that, or an encounter with the game's namesake gimmick, the Emi-Unit droid. Stealth sections against a pseudo-invincible enemy aren't anything new to Metroid, but Dread places more emphasis on these than ever before. In truth, I was dreading this element in particular prior to the game's release. There is a lot of potential for things to go wrong when suddenly mixing genres like this. Exploration and the like would become frustrating and tedious if the unbeatable insta-kill entity was constantly pestering Samus, and by extent the player. Thankfully, the dev team kept things simple and clean. The Emi encounters are contained within specific clearly marked areas on the map. Whenever the player sets foot into the droid's domain, they know to be on the lookout for the skittering pest. The path forward loops periodically through the droid's patrol route, for a few rooms at a time. There's always an optimal intended path around the Emi, and the goal in these encounters is to recognize and take advantage of that. Most often it's the correct use of the new camouflage ability, other times there's no choice except to run and utilize the fast and sleek movement to escape. This segments the stealth into quick bursts at a time, and turns the encounters into sort of environmental puzzles, which fits the game's intended design quite well. Finding the path forward is always the goal, and the Emmy just recontextualizes that goal. And just like with every other aspect of the game, the escalation of challenge is steady and natural throughout the game. You can run circles around the first few Emmy, but the later models are upgraded with extra skills other than skittering along the walls, making them significantly more formidable. One turns into Speedy Gonzales, one has X-ray vision,
surprise, motherfucker,
and one is suddenly gay now. Something worthy of note is the way the game handles the failure state once the Emmy captures Samus. During the kill animation, there is an extremely tight quick-time event, and if done correctly, Samus kicks herself free from the droid's grip, allowing her an opening to dash away. Timing for the counter is hard to nail, but it is always there as a last desperate lifeline. It keeps the Emmy as a serious threat, while offering a neat way to keep the player invested in the fight to the bitter end. And whenever you get the timing right, after the built-up tension, it's a fucking glorious rush each time. All in all, Dread is just a fun game to play. All the mechanics work in their intended ways, there's nothing superfluous, each moment is just meaty gameplay goodness. When you have a video game that's such an enjoyable, juicy steak like this, everything else is just gravy. Number 4. The Gravy. The game looks fantastic. Everything from the environments and creatures to the lighting and particle effects, the visuals teeter just between realism and stylized rule of coolness. Considering the power of Nintendo consoles, keeping things a tad cartoony is always the right call. The game is gonna look great even after the next console generation rolls around, instead of falling into that uncanny valley many AAA games find themselves in. It's a very Nintendo-like way to handle graphics. The art direction is amazingly Metroidy, for a lack of a better word. That certain cold and lonely, yet awe-inspiringly beautiful science fiction flair. The world feels realistic and tangible, while being alien and dangerous, like there's always something murky and horrid lurking just beneath the surface, both metaphorically and literally. Some of the enemies in particular are awesomely grotesque. Juxtaposed to that, Samus is just plain awesome. There's so much fan service in Dread, it's unreal. And no, I'm not talking about TNA, I'm talking about the best kind of fan service, letting a character's actual character shine. Samus is always built up as the biggest, baddest, boldest bounty hunter in the universe, and here she really lives up to that hype. In every cutscene, she just annihilates her foes with such confidence I can't help but smile. She's been doing this since she was a little girl, so she ought to be powerful and fearless at the current end of the Metroid timeline. Hearing Samus speak a single line in the entire game, in native Chozo no less, is pure auditory treat. And it's also an important piece of characterization. During her meeting with Quiet Robe, Samus listens to the Chozo Elder in revering silence, delivering a single piece of reassurance at the very end. This is important, since it separates Samus meaningfully from other fully silent video game characters. Samus isn't a silent character, but rather a stoic no-nonsense warrior, who only speaks when she actually has something to say. That's cool! That's a defined character. That's Samus Aran. She has an actual character. It's great to see it given room to flourish. Going more superficial, the new power armor design is great. It balances the motifs of force and grace, befitting Samus's character. It carries echoes of the fusion suit design, in the almost organic-looking parts of it, like cartilage or something, which is a nice touch considering the game is a direct sequel to Fusion almost 2 decades later. For me, it looks even better in the Varia suit variant. The mix of orange and white with the gold highlights is pleasing to the eye. It also shows that white is totally Samus's color. It kinda reminds me of the light suit from Prime 2, which is objectively the best suit design in the series. But seriously, the look and design of Samus is well thought out. The new suit just meshes seamlessly with the art direction of the game, and it's detailed beautifully. Even the tiniest features make sense, like those small plates at the ankles that slide and shift as Samus crouches. The game is filled with tiny neat design details like that. Like when you use the Omega Cannon, the camera shifts so that you can see past the doorways, between two screens, and the game adds this ghostly mist effect so that the enemy can lumber through the door all menacing. Or the fact that the boss fight with Kraid has the fat lizard bastard chained up. In the past games, I've always wondered why doesn't this humongous creature just squash Samus with its enormous jiggling physique. What's stopping him? I mean, even K. Rool has mastered that strategy. It's so obvious. But in Dread, the fight makes sense. Of course, he cannot reach Samus because he's chained up. The game makes actual sense. It's so awesome when things make sense. It's great to see a legacy franchise like this returning and managing not to fuck everything up. The game's story is simple, and rather straightforward when you boil it down to its fundamentals, but for what it is, it's efficiently told. The narrative remains largely in the background, as is suitable for an action game, only coming prominent in a few key sections of the journey. Metroid has never been a story-focused series, even though the lore behind it is quite extensive and intriguing. Dread's story is hands down the best the series has been. It respects the previous lore, builds on it, and moves the current saga of the series, if you will, to a satisfying conclusion, bringing all the themes of the series around full circle. Samus's origin, her clan, her very DNA, the Metroids, the X-Parasite, every plot element in the main series is touched upon and tied up satisfyingly. It's clearly a game made for long-time followers of the series. It's not trying to destroy what came before, or strictly repeat the old stuff in worse ways, but rather give the fans exactly what they want. Fancy that. Even the big endgame dun 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 twist, the fact that the whole game has been one giant big-brained scheme by Ravenbeak to test Samus and force the Metroid metamorphosis out of her, is foreshadowed fantastically. I for one was able to see it coming long before the reveal. I mean, Adam calls Samus Lady, even at the very beginning of the game. It was quite obvious. I like it when stories make sense. So it's probably become pretty obvious how much I adore this game. So do I have any gripes? Let's see here. Oh, yeah, the soundtrack is pretty lackluster. There's a couple of classic tunes used in the opening and ending sequences, but that's the best the music gets. The new original stuff is decidedly atmospheric and somewhat generic. It does its job setting up the mood, but there's no true bangers here. I wouldn't have minded hearing a bit more of the older stuff. Also, the opening cutscene cannot be skipped for some odd reason. You just have to sit there waiting for 2 minutes each time you start the game anew. All the other cutscenes can be skipped, so I don't know what happened here. Yeah, when I'm forced to scrape that firmly at the bottom of the barrel to find something to bitch about, then I'd say the game has clicked with me on some visceral level. I do like Metroid Dread. It's one of those gamey games, easy to pick up, quick to finish, where every second is the thing I came for, the core experience. Oftentimes, these types of games are my favorites. Just fast and pristine experiences that I can run through whenever and know I'll have a good time. I've already finished it more times in a couple of weeks than many of my other favorites, and I know I'll be returning to it for years to come. Welcome to the GOAT family! You should all subscribe to me, that would be super cool. Take care everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one.